Ingles.fm, Real English Conversations, Series 1. Podcast 6. Television. Televisión. Este podcast contiene una conversación real y sin guión entre dos hablantes nativos de inglés, Mark y Tom. Oirás primero la conversación y a continuación una clase de inglés con explicaciones en español. Cada podcast viene con un workbook detallado que puedes descargar desde nuestra página web ingles.fm. Incluye una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Recuerda que los miembros de nuestra lista de distribución reciben gratis transcripciones extra de nuestros podcasts, además de muchas otras cosas gratis. Así que no olvides apuntarte al consultar la página. ¡Buena suerte!
Hi, my name's Tom and I'm sitting here with Mark again. Hi Mark.
Hi Tom.
Today we're back in Park Miró in Barcelona and you can probably hear the parrots all around us still.
Yeah, permanent resident.
Yep, and what are we going to talk about today?
Well, probably the world's most popular pastime.
Which is?
Television.
Okay, one of our favourite subjects, or perhaps not. We'll find that out in a minute. So, Mark, can you tell us where the word television came from?
Well, it's a mixture of a Greek word and a Latin word. The Greek word is tele, which means far, and the Latin word is visio, which means sight.
Okay.
So, literally, television is a combination meaning far sight.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the history of television. I will go through a couple of dates quickly. In the 19th century, it was a combination of English and German inventors that invented the components that were later used for the television. And it wasn't until 1925 in London that a Scottish inventor, John Logie Baird, demonstrated the first broadcast moving images, and that was in Selfridges, the shop in London. And in 1928 and 1929, the USA and the UK launched their first publicly announced television broadcast. So that was years ago now, so 80 years ago. And in 1936, the BBC became the world's first high-definition television service. And at that point, they were broadcasting only 4 hours a day, and there were only 15,000 televisions in the UK.
So things have changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah, so we want to move on and talk a little bit about the BBC, because we grew up with the BBC and it's been very much part of our lives. So can you explain what makes the BBC a little bit different, Mark?
Right, it's the world's #1 broadcasting corporation, and
it's the largest broadcasting organisation in the world, isn't it, I think? And it's also the largest news broadcasting operation in the world now.
yes, it's also an autonomous broadcaster, and it operates under a royal charter which is renewable every 10 years, but the charter insists that the BBC's views are to be entirely independent of private or government influence.
Okay, and it also has as part of its mission is to inform, educate and entertain. So it's very popular, and since 1927 it's been very much part of an incredibly important British institution. And nowadays BBC One and BBC Two are watched by 90% of the British population every week.
It's an enormous amount of people.
Yeah, it's incredibly popular, and that's a 27% share of the total viewing in the UK, despite the fact that 83% of homes have commercial channels now. They have the satellite packages with like 200 channels. So why do you think it's so popular?
I think it's the quality of the programming. The BBC has this reputation that it needs to maintain under its royal charter to be independent and not politically or commercially subjective. So
we always know we're getting as close to the truth as you possibly can, don't we, really?
Yes, there's no spin. So the documentaries are very famous around the world, very informative, very educational, very well made, and people like to watch uninterrupted television because the BBC has no adverts, no commercials, so you can watch a programme from start to finish without spending time being sold products.
It's fantastic. I love that. I don't like advertising. Anyway, the BBC, or as we also call it in England, Auntie, or the Beeb, is funded by the licence fee. Now, can you explain how the licence fee works?
Everyone in the UK who owns a television set has to pay, now it's £139.50, so approximately €170 a year to receive TV broadcasting.
And that's colour televisions, isn't it? Because they still have a price for people that have black and white televisions.
Yeah, that's much lower, but the vast majority of people with colour televisions pay the higher amount, and this is used to fund largely the BBC, because as mentioned earlier, there is no commercial revenue from advertisers, so the money is raised from the viewer to create programmes for the viewer.
Okay, and in 2009 the amount that they earned from this licence fee was £3.45 billion, so slightly over €4 billion.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and what do they do about people that don't pay in the UK? When we were students, we got a few nasty letters because we didn't pay our TV licence.
We did, we thought we could avoid it. But there are TV detector vans. These are vans that drive around residential areas with a big antenna on top, and they will detect which houses are receiving television signals. They cross-reference that information with the address to a database, and if that person hasn't paid the license fee, they will receive warning letters through the post telling them it's a criminal offence not to buy a license.
Yeah, and they also have a database in the UK, so whenever anybody buys a television from a shop, your name goes into this database, so the government has access to all the figures and all the names and addresses of who have bought televisions. So obviously they can correlate that data with who has bought license, the TV license, and come round and give you a nasty letter or a nasty surprise.
And they got very efficient at doing that, detecting 95% or more of the population.
Yeah.
They know they cannot get away with not buying a TV license now, whereas in the past people thought it would be easy to avoid.
Yeah, you actually get a criminal record. Theoretically, you can get a criminal record in the UK if you don't buy a license and you watch television.
Incredible.
Anyway, looking a little bit at our viewing habits in the UK compared to Spain. Now, in the UK, we watch the most television in the world, along with America. It works out at about 28 hours a week, which is about 4 hours a day. And in Spain, they watch an average of 26 hours a week, which is about 3.7 hours a day.
So not much difference, really.
No. So, do you watch 4 hours of television a day?
No, not at all. I don't think I've ever watched 4 hours of television in a day, unless it's been during the Olympics or during the World Cup.
So who is watching all this television?
Maybe housewives, retired people, and probably now with the economic crisis and high unemployment in Spain, maybe people without jobs are watching more television now than they previously did.
So Mark, can you tell us a couple of TV related facts from around the world, please?
Well, we know that when the UK and the United States had their first public broadcasters, but for example in Australia they got their first public broadcast channel operational just before the Olympic Games in 1956, which were held in Australia, in Melbourne. So it was coincided to broadcast the Olympics. So
that was nearly 30 years after the UK?
Yes.
What were they doing, the Australians, until that point?
I have no idea what they were doing in 1940s Australia.
Having barbecues, I think. Any more facts?
South Africa, the most economically advanced country in Africa, only got television in 1976 because it was repressed by the apartheid regime.
Really?
But in Zanzibar, for example, small island country or African state, they were watching the first colour television broadcast in 1973. So 3 years before South Africa got television at all.
So we can conclude that the dissemination of television around the world has been very uneven, and it's reached some countries before others, and poorer countries in some instances before richer countries, and so on. Anyway, looking a little bit more at one of the areas that interests us, censorship. What can you tell us about TV censorship, you know, particularly with the UK? Have we ever had television censored?
Well, TV is mildly censored all the time. For example, programs that contain explicit language, violence, adult themes, possibly even some themes of a sexual nature, are not allowed to be broadcast until 9 p.m. at the earliest, which is called this watershed period. So adult programs after 9 o'clock, but not before. And for example, during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness from Sinn Féin and other Republicans were not allowed to have their voices broadcast. So if they were interviewed, an actor would have to read the transcript of what the particular people would say, because the government decided that because it was promoting terrorism against the UK and against the British government, the royal family, they were not allowed to have their voice broadcast on British television.
No, I remember that well, actually. I thought it was very strange. You'd see somebody talking and somebody else would be, they would have a voiceover always.
Like watching a foreign film, that they were speaking English on English television.
Yeah. Anyway, finally, I just want to conclude with a little chat about what kind of social impact you think television has had around the world, and particularly about things like media violence, and do you think that's affected people? Violence in films and so on.
Many people have said that kids, adolescents and even adults, if they watch too many violent films, they will commit acts of violence mimicking the scenes from films or TV series. But I don't really think that's the case.
No, I looked this up actually because it interests me a lot, and there's a whole area called media violence research. And it's actually shown that as media content has increased in violence in the past few decades, violent crimes among youth have declined rapidly. And also in the US, they did a big study about the school shooting incidents like Columbine, and they found there was no correlation at all between the television viewing habits of the murderers and what they'd done. So
I think that's probably more down to the United States and the availability of guns.
Of course, yeah. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Hola, me llamo Rosario y en la clase de inglés de hoy vamos a centrarnos en el verbo compuesto o phrasal verb to get away with y su versión coloquial to brag. Hay pequeñas diferencias de significado de to get away with. El primer significado, para el que no hay una traducción directa, es conseguir hacer algo con éxito, aunque no sea de la mejor manera. Aquí hay algunos ejemplos.
Do you think he can get away with wearing those clothes to the wedding?
En este caso quiere decir, ¿crees que puede ponerse esa ropa para la boda sin problemas?
Do you think I can get away with only 1 hour of study and pass the exam tomorrow?
Aquí quiere decir, ¿crees que puedo pasar con solo 1 hora de estudio para aprobar el examen de mañana?
Can we get away with cleaning the house once a week?
¿Crees que podemos salirnos con la nuestra si limpiamos la casa solo 1 vez a la semana? También se puede usar en negativo, cambiando la preposición with por without. Como por ejemplo,
Do you think you can get away without learning the irregular verbs in English?
que significa, ¿crees que puedes pasar sin aprender los verbos irregulares en inglés?
Do you think I can get away without studying for this exam?
Que significa, ¿crees que puedo pasar sin estudiar para este examen?
In England, can you get away without ordering rounds of drinks in the pub?
En Inglaterra, ¿te puedes escapar de pagar rondas en el pub? Hay otro uso parecido de to get away with, que significa conseguir que no te castiguen por algo. Algunos ejemplos.
The robbers got away with the crime.
Esto significa que los ladrones salieron impunes.
If I think I can get away with it, I won't pay any tax.
Esto significa no pagaré impuestos si veo que puedo evitarlo.
Do you think you can get away with telling your boss you don't respect him?
Esto significa, ¿crees que puedes decirle a tu jefe que no le tienes respeto sin problemas? Por último, una expresión coloquial que significa lo mismo que to get away with something es to blag. Algunos ejemplos son:
I blagged my exam.
quiere decir que aprobé el examen sin estudiar demasiado.
I blagged my boss.
Que significa, le dije a mi jefe algo que no era verdad y me creyó. Por ejemplo, que ayer estuve enfermo.
We blagged the tax office.
Que significa, hemos logrado engañar a Hacienda.
We hope you found this class useful, and you can now get away with using these expressions confidently when you speak English.
Gracias por acompañarnos con este podcast de Ingles.fm. Recuerda que el workbook contiene una transcripción completa de la conversación, listas de vocabulario, notas culturales y la clase. Lo puedes descargar de forma instantánea desde Ingles.fm. Nos vemos.